What do you think you are doing? Stay away from his table. You are in big trouble.
I was just trying to help him.
I didn't mean to cause much trouble, and I will leave. But please, do not fire the girl who tried to help him.
I've had enough of your excuses. You're fired. Get out of my restaurant and take your final check on the way out.
Don't feel sorry for me, sir. It is what it is. I'll manage.
The money was for my mom's medication. How can I afford it now that I lost my job?
The restaurant went completely silent when the manager slammed Mercy's final paycheck onto the counter. You're fired. Mercy stared at him. Because I gave an old man a plate of food? Because you stole from this restaurant. I didn't steal anything. He was hungry. The manager pointed toward the elderly Korean man sitting alone in the corner. He couldn't afford the meal. That doesn't make it free. Mercy looked at the old man. His worn coat was soaked from the rain. His hands trembled around a glass of water. He looked like someone who had nowhere else to go. Mercy swallowed her anger. If feeding a hungry person is stealing, she said quietly, then maybe I'm not sorry. A few customers turned to watch. The manager's face hardened. Get out. Mercy picked up her small handbag and walked toward the door. But just before she left, the old man suddenly spoke. Wait. Mercy turned. He looked directly into her eyes. What is your name? Mercy. Mercy what? Mercy 80. The old man slowly nodded, as though he had just been given an answer to a question nobody else knew he had asked. Then Mercy walked into the rain. She had no idea that within 24 hours, the restaurant manager who had just fired her would be begging for his job. Because the poor old man he'd thrown away was Kang Tae-sung, the billionaire owner of the entire hotel chain. And the first thing Kang Tae-sung did after revealing his identity wasn't punish the manager. He asked one question. Where does Mercy 80 live? Welcome to Afro Meets Seoul Stories. On today's episode, you'd get a dose of unexpected encounters and beautiful beginnings. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send this story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And also tell me in the comments which city and country you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive back into this amazing story. Mercy didn't sleep that night. She lay on the thin mattress in her one-room apartment in Itaewon, listening to rain tap the window, running numbers in her head that never came out right. Rent was due in 6 days. Her mother's dialysis bill in Lagos was overdue by 3 weeks already, and every time she called home her mother's voice sounded a little thinner, a little more tired, like something in her was quietly giving up while pretending not to. She'd come to Seoul 2 years ago on a work visa that promised more than it delivered. She spoke Korean well enough to get by, not well enough to argue her way out of being fired by a manager who wanted an excuse. She had learned in 2 years exactly how invisible a poor African woman could be in a country that smiled at her in customer service and looked through her everywhere else. But she had also learned something else. Something her mother taught her back home in a kitchen that never had quite enough food but somehow always found one more plate for whoever showed up hungry. That kindness wasn't a transaction. It didn't ask what you'd get back. It just asked if someone needed it. She hadn't known the old man's name. Hadn't cared. He was cold and shaking and alone, and she had a job that let her put food in front of people, so she put food in front of him. She would have done it again in that same moment, jobless or not. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined lying there in the dark, was that 6 floors above the Han River, in an office with glass walls and a view of the whole glittering city, Kang Tae-sung was sitting across from his head of security, and the only words out of his mouth were her name, repeated like a question he needed answered before he could breathe easy. Mercy 80. Find her employment record. Find her address. Find her visa status. And find out. He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. Find out if she has any idea who I am. His security chief hesitated. Sir, if I may ask, why does this matter so much? She gave you soup. It's a kind gesture, nothing more. Kang Tae-sung looked out at the river, lights trembling on black water. 40 years I have eaten at tables surrounded by people who wanted something from me, he said. Tonight, for the first time in longer than you can imagine, someone looked at me and saw a hungry old man. Not a chairman. Not a fortune. A person. He turned back. That is worth more to me than anything in this building. I want to know everything about her before I decide what to do about it. What he didn't say, what he wouldn't say to anyone yet, not even himself fully, was that there was a second reason her name mattered. A reason buried in a decision he'd been circling for 2 years. Ever since his doctors had used the word terminal in a sentence he'd refused to repeat to his own son. He needed someone to inherit not just his company but his conscience. Someone who wouldn't need to be taught kindness because kindness was already the reflex. He had spent 2 years searching boardrooms and bloodlines for that person. He had found her in a diner in the rain, offering soup to a stranger she'd never see again. By morning, the restaurant manager who fired her had received a phone call that made him drop his own coffee cup on the floor. By noon, he was standing outside Kang Tae-sung's office, sweating through his shirt, rehearsing an apology he'd never get the chance to deliver, because Kang Tae-sung wasn't interested in his apology at all. He was interested in one thing only: getting Mercy 80 through his front door before someone else. His son, his rivals, his own mortality, got there first. The black car pulled up outside Mercy's building at 9 in the morning, and at first she thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone important going somewhere else, someone who'd taken a wrong turn onto her cracked, narrow street. She was on her way out to look for work, resume in a plastic folder, wearing the one blazer she owned that didn't have a coffee stain on it. A man in a dark suit stepped out and said her name like he already knew it belonged to her. Miss 80. Mr. Kang would like to see you. Mr. Kang who? Kang Tae-sung. The name meant nothing to her. She almost laughed. I don't know any Kang Tae-sung. You fed him soup 2 nights ago, the man said. In a diner. You lost your job for it. Mercy went very still. The old man's face came back to her, the trembling hands, the too big coat. That was him. The billionaire. Chairman of the Kang Group, the driver said. Yes. He almost said no. Some instinct in her, sharpened by 2 years of learning how easily powerful men in this city could take advantage of a woman with no visa protection and no family nearby, told her to shut the door and walk away. But there was rent due in 5 days and her mother's next dialysis session was in 3, and whatever this was, it was better than the nothing she currently had. He got in the car. The Kang Group tower swallowed her whole, marble floors that reflected her own nervous face, elevators that moved so smoothly she couldn't feel them rising, a silence so total it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. She was led to the top floor, past assistants who stared at her like she'd walked in wearing the wrong century, and into an office with a view that made her stomach drop. Kang Tae-sung stood when she entered. Not something Mercy expected from a man of his position. He looked entirely different than he had in the diner. The coat was gone, replaced by a suit that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years, but his eyes were the same. Tired. Watchful. Kind underneath the tiredness. Miss 80, he said. Thank you for coming. I didn't know who you were, she said immediately, because she needed him to hear that before anything else happened. I want that on record. I gave you food because you looked cold and hungry. Not because. I know, he said. That's exactly why you're here. He gestured for her to sit. He didn't, not yet. I lost my job for helping you, she said. I'm not looking for a reward. I don't want your money. Something shifted in his face. Surprise, then something closer to satisfaction, like she'd just passed a test she didn't know she was taking. I'm not offering you money, he said. I'm offering you a job. My personal assistant. Full salary, housing, medical coverage. For you, and I understand for a mother in Lagos who needs it. Mercy's chest tightened. How do you know about my mother? I make it my business to know who I hire, he said simply. But that's not why I want you here, Miss 80. I want you here because in 40 years, you are the first stranger who has ever looked at me and not seen a fortune. I intend to keep you close. Before she could answer, the office door opened without a knock, and a man walked in who changed the temperature of the whole room. He was tall, dressed in black, with a face carved from something that didn't easily soften. Sharp jaw, cold eyes, the kind of stillness that made you feel like you were being calculated rather than looked at. He didn't glance at his father first. He looked at Mercy, and something in his gaze made her want to shrink and stand taller at the same time. This is her, he said, not to Mercy, to his father, like she wasn't in the room at all. Do-hyun, Kang Tae-sung said, a warning in his voice. This is Mercy 80. Mercy, my son. Do-hyun's eyes didn't warm at all. If anything, they went colder. The waitress from the diner. He said the word waitress like it was an accusation. Father, can I speak with you? Alone. Anything you want to say, you can say in front of her. Do-hyun's jaw tightened. He looked at Mercy again, longer this time, like he was pricing her, trying to figure out what angle she was playing, what she wanted, how far she'd go to get it. Mercy had been looked at like that before, by men who assumed a poor African woman in Korea was only ever after one thing. She held his gaze and didn't look away, even though something about him, the danger under his stillness, the way the room seemed to bend slightly around him, made her want to. You expect me to believe, Do-hyun said slowly, that she just happened to feed a homeless-looking stranger who happened to be worth billions, and now she's conveniently standing in your office being offered a job. I didn't know, Mercy said sharp now. I don't care if you believe me. You should care, Do-hyun said, because I'm going to be watching you very, very closely. Kang Tae-sung almost smiled. Good, he said. Then it's settled. Do-hyun, she'll be working directly under my office. I want you to personally oversee her onboarding. Do-hyun's eyes snapped to his father, something like betrayal flickering across his face before the coldness sealed back over it. You're punishing me. I'm testing both of you, his father said. Now if you'll excuse us, Miss Adi and I have a great deal to discuss. Do-hyun left without another word, but at the door he looked back once, and Mercy felt that look land somewhere she wasn't ready for. She had no idea, standing in that office with the whole city glittering beneath her, that the man who just walked out was the most feared name in Seoul's underworld, that the hotel business was only the surface of what the Kang family actually controlled, and that in 3 months his hand would be the one holding a gun to her chest. What do you think is really going on in Do-hyun's head right now? Suspicion, jealousy, or something he doesn't want to admit to himself? Drop your theory in the comments. And hey, if you're enjoying this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss where this goes. What will happen next? Mercy's first week at the Kang Group was unlike anything she'd known. She had an office with her name on the door, an actual name, and a salary that made her cry the first time she saw the number, because it meant her mother's dialysis was covered for a full year without her having to think about it twice. But Do-hyun made sure she never forgot she was being watched. He assigned her to shadow him directly instead of his father, a decision that surprised everyone in the building, including her. If you're going to be near my father, he told her flatly on her second day, you go through me first. He tested her constantly. Small things, asking her to handle a delicate negotiation with barely any notice, watching to see if she'd panic or fold. He didn't. He gave her contradictory instructions just to see whether she'd catch the inconsistency or simply obey. She caught it every time and told him so without flinching. You're either very good at this, he said one evening, watching her close out a set of contracts he'd deliberately made confusing, or very good at pretending. I don't pretend, Mercy said. I don't have the energy for it. I have a mother on dialysis and rent due on the 5th. Pretending is a luxury. Something in his face flickered, not quite softening but shifting, like a door opening half an inch in a wall he'd built a long time ago. She started noticing things about him that didn't fit the cold, calculating heir she'd assumed he was. The way he never raised his voice even when furious. His anger went quiet instead of loud, which somehow made it worse and made her pay closer attention. The way he canceled a meeting without explanation every Thursday evening and came back the next morning looking like he hadn't slept. The way the household staff flinched slightly whenever he entered a room, not from disrespect, but from something closer to fear. She asked one of the older assistants about it once, carefully. The woman lowered her voice like she was confessing something dangerous. You don't know what the Kang family really does, do you? They own hotels. The assistant's laugh had no humor in it. The hotels are real. So is everything under them. She wouldn't say more and Mercy didn't push, but the warning sat in her chest like a stone for days. Then came the incident that changed everything between them. She was leaving the office late, past 11, the building nearly empty, when she heard raised voices from the private elevator bank, low and urgent, in a mix of Korean she couldn't fully follow. She should have left. Every instinct told her to leave. Instead she stayed in the shadow of a support column, and she watched 2 men in suits half carry a third man toward the elevator, bleeding, barely conscious, with Do-hyun standing over the scene giving quiet, Precise instructions like he was directing traffic instead of watching a man bleed on marble. He saw her. For one full second neither of them moved. Then he crossed the lobby in 4 strides, gripped her arm and pulled her into an empty conference room, shutting the door hard enough that the glass rattled. "What did you see?" His voice was low, controlled, and underneath the control something that might have been fear. "Enough," she said, her heart slamming. "Who was that man? What's happening to him? That's not your business." "You're the hotel heir," she said, backing up half a step even as she refused to look away from him. "Hotel heirs don't have men bleeding out in their lobby at midnight." Do-hyun's jaw worked. For a long moment she thought he'd lied to her, the way she was sure he lied to everyone. Smoothly, completely, without a flicker of guilt. Instead he said, quiet and flat, "My family controls more than hotels, Mercy. We control things this city doesn't put on paper. Ports. Debts people can't repay any other way. Men who make sure certain problems disappear before they become public ones." He paused. "I told you I'd be watching you closely. Now you understand why it actually matters. You've seen something you can't unsee and I need to know what you're going to do with it." Mercy's mouth was dry. Every rational part of her said run, say nothing, forget this ever happened, get on a plane back to Lagos before this world swallows you whole. But she thought of the old man in the diner, shaking in his wet coat, and the way she hadn't hesitated then either. "I'm not going to do anything with it," she said. "I'm not scared of you. You should be." "Maybe," she said. "But I'm not." Something raw crossed his face. Not danger this time, but something closer to disbelief, like she'd said the one thing nobody in his entire violent, guarded life had ever said to him and meant it. "Everyone is scared of me," he said quietly. "My father is scared of what I've become. The board is scared of what I might do to keep control. Even the men who work for me are scared, every single day, that I'll decide they're a liability." He stepped closer and this time she didn't step back. "Why aren't you?" "Because you haven't hurt me," Mercy said. "You've been cold. You've tested me. You've watched me like I'm a threat. But you've never once actually hurt me, Do-hyun. And I think somewhere under all of this," she gestured at the room, the blood still visible on the lobby floor beyond the glass, "there's a man who doesn't want to be what his family made him." He didn't answer. He looked at her like she'd cut something open in him that he'd spent years keeping sealed shut. And for one dangerous second, standing far too close in a conference room at midnight with a bleeding man 3 floors below them, Mercy thought he might actually kiss her. Instead he stepped back, composure snapping back into place like a mask. "Go home," he said. "Say nothing. And Mercy, stay away from me. For your own sake." She didn't know, walking out of that building into the cold night air, that his warning wasn't cruelty. It was the first thing he'd ever done to try to protect her. Do you think Do-hyun is warning her because he actually cares? Or because he's scared of what she's starting to mean to him? Tell me your theory in the comments. I really want to know what you think happens next. And if this story has you hooked, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because what will happen next is about to change everything for both of them. She didn't stay away from him. She told herself she would. She spent 3 days keeping her interactions with Do-hyun strictly professional, arriving early enough to avoid the elevator ride they'd normally share, staying in her own office instead of walking past his. But on the 4th day, Kang Tae-sung collapsed in a board meeting, and every plan Mercy had made to protect herself from this family fell apart in an instant. She was the one who found him first, actually, slumped forward at the head of the table while executives around him froze instead of acting. She was the one who caught him before his head hit the marble, who shouted for someone to call an ambulance while everyone else stood paralyzed by the sight of the most powerful man in the room suddenly looking small and breakable. Do-hyun arrived at the hospital 11 minutes later, and Mercy had never seen him like that. Not the cold air, not the calculating watchdog, but a son standing in a hallway with his hands shaking, staring through a window at his father hooked up to machines. "He's been sick for 2 years, Do-hyun said, not really to her, more like he needed to say it out loud to someone. "Cancer. He never told the board. Never told me the full truth until 3 months ago." His voice cracked slightly. "That's why he's been giving away pieces of the company. That's why he was out in the rain that night in that diner. He does that, walks the city alone sometimes when the treatments make him restless, when he can't stand being surrounded by people managing him." He looked at Mercy. That night wasn't random. He was testing something. Testing everyone. He's been testing candidates for 2 years. Candidates for what? Do-hyun's jaw tightened. To inherit control. Not just the hotels. Everything. He doesn't trust the board. He doesn't fully trust me, not with the parts of this family he's ashamed of. He exhaled hard. He told me last week he was naming someone unexpected in his will. I assumed he meant a cousin. A rival executive. I never imagined. You think he means me. I know he means you. The words sat between them like a detonation waiting to go off. Mercy felt the floor tilt slightly. She hadn't asked for this. Hadn't wanted an empire. Hadn't wanted to be the center of a succession war in a family she'd known for exactly 9 days. I don't want it, she said. I don't want any of it. I want your father to survive this, and I want to go back to being invisible because invisible was safer. It's too late for invisible, Do-hyun said quietly. The moment he said your name in that diner, invisible stopped being an option for you. That night, sitting outside his father's hospital room in plastic chairs that had gone cold hours ago, something between them finally cracked open. He talked for the first time about what it meant to grow up as the only son of a man who ran an empire with 2 faces. One legal, gleaming, photographed for magazines, and one buried in ports and debts and men who disappeared when they became inconvenient. He talked about the first time his father had made him watch a punishment be carried out at 16, to teach him what leadership in their world actually cost. He talked about how he'd hated his father for it and hated himself more for eventually becoming good at it. I've done things, he said, staring at the hospital floor, not at her. Things that would make you walk out that door and never look back if I told you all of it. Tell me one, Mercy said. He looked at her, surprised. One thing, she said again. Not to test you. I'm not scared of you, remember? I want to actually know you. Not the version everyone else is scared of. So he told her. Quietly in that cold hallway he told her about a man 3 years ago. A business partner who'd betrayed his father, stolen from the company, and threatened to go to the police with fabricated evidence unless he was paid off. Do-hyun had been the one sent to handle it. He didn't tell her exactly what handled meant, but she understood enough from the way his voice went flat and distant that it wasn't a conversation that ended peacefully. I didn't have a choice, he said. In this family that's what they tell you every time. There's never a choice. Just consequences you're too weak to accept if you don't act. Mercy reached over and took his hand, not out of pity, but because something about a man finally telling the truth about himself, ugly parts included, made her trust him more than his silence ever had. You have a choice now, she said. Right now, sitting here. You chose to tell me the truth instead of the version that makes you look better. That's a choice most people in your world never make. He looked down at her hand in his like it was something he didn't know what to do with. My father's illness isn't the only thing accelerating, he said slowly. There's a rival family, the Choi Syndicate, that's wanted a stake in our ports for a decade. My father was supposed to finalize a marriage alliance with their daughter before he got sick. It's the only reason they haven't moved against us directly. He met her eyes. If he dies before that alliance is settled and I'm not married into it, they will consider it an act of war. Against the company. Against our family. Against anyone standing close to me. Mercy felt the warmth drain slowly out of the moment. Are you telling me you're supposed to marry someone else? I'm telling you, Do-hyun said, that the moment my father dies, everyone connected to me becomes a target, including you if anyone believes you matter to me. He paused. And you do. That's the problem. You matter to me more than anyone has in years, and that makes you the most dangerous person you could possibly be right now. 3 days later, Kang Tae-sung woke up. His first act, still weak, wires still taped to his arm, was to call his lawyer to his hospital bedside and formally amend his will, naming Mercy 80 co-trustee of the Kang Group's charitable foundation, with a path to full inheritance rights contingent on one condition written in his own shaking handwriting, that she remain by her own free choice, close to this family through whatever came next. The Choi Syndicate found out within 48 hours. And the first message they sent wasn't a threat. It was a photograph. Mercy walking out of the hospital, time-stamped, with a single line beneath it in Korean that Do-hyun read and then said nothing about for a full hour, his face gone the color of ash. We know who she is. Decide what she's worth to you before we decide for you. The message from the Choi Syndicate didn't demand money. It demanded a meeting, Do-hyun alone at a private dock warehouse near Incheon midnight 3 days later. refuse, and the arrangement his father had spent a decade protecting would be considered void, along with every unofficial truce that came with it. Do-hyun didn't tell Mercy where he was going. He told her instead that their alliance was over, coldly, deliberately, standing in his father's hospital room doorway so there'd be no scene, no argument she could win. "I'm ending this," he said. "Whatever this was. You should go back to what you were doing before any of us existed in your life." "You don't mean that." "I mean every word of it." His voice didn't waver, but his eyes did. "Just once, just enough. You were never supposed to matter this much." She let him walk away because she didn't yet understand what he was actually doing. It took her father-in-waiting, Kang Tae-sung, propped up in his hospital bed, weaker than she'd ever seen him, to explain it in 3 sentences that made her blood go cold. "He's not ending anything," the old man said. "He's going to that dock to offer himself instead of you. And the Choi family does not let men like my son walk out of rooms like that alive." Mercy was in a car within 4 minutes. She reached the warehouse at 12:14 a.m., against every instinct that told her a poor waitress from Lagos had no business walking into a room full of Korea's most dangerous men. Through a gap in the loading door she saw it. Do-hyun standing alone in the center of cold concrete, surrounded by 6 men, facing a woman in a sharp red coat who could only be the Choi family's heir. And in the woman's hand, held loosely, almost bored, a gun. "You come alone," the woman said, "to tell me the alliance is dead, and you expect to walk out of here breathing? I expect you to remember that killing me starts a war neither family survives," Do-hyun said. "My father is dying. I am the only thing standing between an orderly transition and total chaos in every port this city depends on. Kill me and you don't get power. You get anarchy, and anarchy is bad for business." The woman considered this, and for one terrible second, Mercy thought it might actually work, until one of the men at the edge of the group noticed movement at the loading door and dragged Mercy into the light before she could retreat. Do-hyun turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, she watched him lose complete control of his face. "Ah," the Choi heir said, delighted in the worst possible way. "The waitress. This changes things considerably." She crossed the floor and pressed the gun almost gently into Do-hyun's hand instead of holding it herself. "Here's my counteroffer, Kang Do-hyun. You want the alliance broken cleanly with no war, no bad blood between our families? Prove your loyalty to your own house instead of hers. Prove you can still do what your father built you to do." "No," Do-hyun said immediately. "Then I'll do it myself, and it won't be quick, and it won't be private, and everyone will know your empire couldn't protect the one person you actually cared about." That was the moment, the exact moment, from the very first 30 seconds of this story. Mercy on her knees on cold concrete, not marble, blood already welling from a shallow cut at her temple where one of the men had shoved her down too hard. Do-hyun standing over her with a gun in a shaking hand, and every second stretching out like it might never end. "Do-hyun," she said, "you don't have to do this." His hand shook harder. Everyone in that warehouse expected one of 2 endings. Either he pulled the trigger to save the empire and everyone in it, becoming fully the man his father had trained him to be, or he refused and they both died there on the concrete, and the Choi family took the ports by force within the week. Do-hyun did neither. He turned the gun in one motion too fast for anyone to stop, and put it against his own head instead. "Then we both die tonight," he said, voice flat and absolutely certain. "Because I am done being a man who proves loyalty with someone else's blood. If that's the only version of me you'll accept, then there is no version of me left to negotiate with." The Choi heir's composure cracked for the first time all night. This wasn't in any script she'd prepared for. A man willing to die rather than kill the woman he loved wasn't a threat she knew how to price. It was Kang Tae-sung arriving 11 minutes later against every doctor's order, wheelchair-bound and hooked to a portable oxygen line, who ended it, not with violence, but with a folder of documents proving the Choi family's own illegal port dealings, evidence he'd been sitting on for 3 years as insurance he'd hoped never to use. "We can destroy each other tonight," he told the Choi heir, "or we can both walk away and let the next generation decide what kind of world they actually want to build. My son just showed you which kind of man he is. I suggest you decide quickly which kind of woman you want to be remembered as." The alliance dissolved without another shot fired. Kang Tae-sung passed away 8 months later, peacefully at home with Mercy and Do-hyun both at his bedside, The company's charitable foundation already restructured under Mercy's direction exactly as he'd written it. Do-hyun took control of the legitimate business and within 2 years, quietly dismantled the parts of his father's empire he'd hated his whole life, choosing slowly, painfully, to become someone new instead of someone inherited. Mercy never went back to being invisible. He didn't need to. She'd learned, standing on that warehouse floor with a gun inches from her face, that the version of herself who fed a stranger soup out of pure instinct was never the small, powerless woman the world kept trying to convince her she was. She married Do-hyun a year later, in a small ceremony neither family's business associates were invited to, just the people who actually mattered, which turned out to be a very short, very honest list. Kindness, it turned out, was never the weak choice. It was the only thing strong enough to survive everything that came after it. Would you have done what Mercy did? Walked toward danger for someone who'd only known you a few weeks? And do you think Do-hyun really would have pulled that trigger on himself if his father hadn't arrived in time? If this story moved you, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you never miss the next one. And tell me in the comments which city and country you watched this from. I'd love to know who's out there with us tonight.